Welcome, all my poker friends, to the very first episode of the Poker Breakdown. And in this series, I'm basically going to be taking hands from all of you out in the community and looking at complex spots and breaking it down into simpler, easier to understand thought processes so that you can have a better idea about how to think about the game situationally. And every single day, you can get a little bit of leveling up in your poker game so the game will be more fun and enjoyable as you play more competitively. And for our very first hand, we have a hand submitted from Robert Cooper, who sends us a hand from a small stakes online tournament where he flops the nuts really deep. Let's take a look and see what we can learn today. Okay, so we are early stages of this low stakes online tournament. Our hero here has 6-7 offsuit and elects to open here in the low jack. Now, in tournaments where we have a big edge on our opponents, we can definitely start to get outside of these standard opening ranges and play a little bit looser. However, we're really deep here effectively with the hijack, the cutoff, and the button. So we do need to be a little bit more careful and picky about which hands we choose. So in situations where we're very deep and we want to try and start to play loose, the way we want to favor is on the suited side of our ranges. This is because the deeper stacked we are, the stronger we need hands to be to play for stacks. And so having suited combos where we're more likely to hit flushes and flush draws and backdoor flush draws play a lot better than playing offsuit combos where we have to get 4 to a flush on the board in order to have any kind of flush potential. So if you want to get a little crazy here, open up on the suited side of the board. Open King 5 suited, King 4 suited, King 3 suited. Open 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited, 5-4 suited at a larger frequency, and use those suited hands to your advantage and try to steer clear of these offsuit hands. Our opponent gets flatted by the hijack and it folds around, and we flop gin. Now, in this spot, it's really important we think about what we want to accomplish and how we expect our opponents to react. Here, our hero elects to bet half pot. Here is the challenge, though. We are 76 big blinds effective. In other words, if you look at our stack and their stack, we can both get 76 big blinds in for a total potential pot of 162 big blinds. And we want to try and get as much of that as possible because we've literally flopped the nuts. The problem with only going half pot in a spot like this is it's going to be really hard to use similar sizings across flop, turn, and river and be able to play for stacks. If we go half pot here and our opponent calls, there's going to be about 17 big blinds in the middle. Then if we go half pot again and our opponent calls, there's going to be 31 big blinds in the middle, and we're still going to have about 66 big blinds behind, which means that we have a stack to pot ratio of 2-to-1, and we'd have to jam twice the pot and get called to get his entire stack. And that's entirely too unrealistic. So we have two options here. One, if we think that our opponent is very likely to check behind when we check, we can go for a much larger sizing. The nice thing about this hand being disguised, and anytime you flop the nuts and your hand is disguised, is you can make larger bets because your hand is not one of the hands that your opponent's considering you having. When you bet really big here, they're going to put you on a lot of overpairs, which means they're going to be more likely to overplay their sets, 2-pair combos, and their combo draws where they have maybe like a pair and a straight draw. So we can get away with making a larger sizing here, maybe going 75% or even just under 100% pot to try and build a bigger pot until we get to the river. The other thing that people don't think about doing here that is a really effective tool against more aggressive players is to go for the check raise. If you think your opponent is very likely to bet this board, you check, they bet, you put a raise in, and now if they have a decent hand like a combo draw or 2-pair or a set, now we're going to have a better chance of building a really, really big pot and playing for stacks. As played, hero does call, and the turn comes the jack of diamonds. We basically have the exact same situation again. We want to build a really, really big pot. What I like here in this particular spot, and what I think works better than even on the flop, is definitely trying to go for a check raise in this particular spot. Why would I want to go for a check raise here? Well, think about what this jack does to the board. Now that this jack is hit, any hand with a 10 in it now has a straight draw. Any hand with a queen in it now has a straight draw. People now can have additional equity. For example, let's say they had a hand like Jack 10. Now they've picked up a pair to go with their straight draw, and they're willing to bet at that more. So in a situation where this adds coordination to the board, it makes it more likely that our opponents have something here, and it makes it more likely that they're willing to put chips in the pot versus checking back. This will allow us to build a really big pot. The other thing that this does that's really cool is if our opponent does have a flush draw or a straight draw of some sort, betting here is really not going to be able to scare them off. They're never going to fold a flush draw. They're never going to fold a straight draw. And so you don't put a lot of pressure on those types of hands when the pot is this size. But when you check and they bet those hands and then you put a big raise in, now we put them in a spot where their draws are more uncomfortable to call. We're doing a better job of equity denying those draws out of position. And ultimately, we're neutralizing our positional disadvantage a little bit by putting maximum pressure on our opponents. Hero likes to go half pot here. Again, I would like to see bigger or a check raise because we're having a hard time really building a pot here where we can get the most of our chips. The river comes the 6 of hearts. This puts 3 hearts in play. It also puts 4 to a straight. We are holding that straight, but this is a tough card because definitely if they have like one pair hands, it's going to be hard for them to call a lot. Also, if they have draws that got there, we could get in situations where we bet and get raised. So if you want to bet here, you want to do it against opponents that tend to be very passive and very, very rarely raise. So we can get called when they have worse, and when they raise, they just have better and we can fold. So the more passive the opponent is, the more likely I am to bet. The more aggressive they are, the more I'm likely to check here and pot control at this point because it puts our opponents in a situation where when we check, they do have some missed draws here. 10x didn't get there. Maybe they had a hand like 8-6, 9-6 that now kind of picked up 2 pair and can bet for value. And we give ourselves a much easier decision to make a call, especially with that 3rd heart coming out and having to be a little bit worried about flush draws getting here. So in this situation, I do like a check, which hero does, and villain jams all in. This is a tough spot when our opponent jams all in, 66 big blinds into a 26 big blind pot. You just have to kind of ask yourself, especially at low stakes, whether you think this is a player that is capable of doing this with good hands or whether they're kind of spastic and willing to bluff a lot. In general, we're not going to have the best odds to call here if they're playing any type of reasonable ranges. But if you think you've got an opponent that will just largely stack off or play very poor poker, then you can kind of make the side call and re-enter if you are incorrect. Villain here does indeed turn his open-ended straight draw into a bluff. Probably didn't need to go this big. This is one of the things, it's like when you're trying to get hands to fold, you don't necessarily have to go all in. If he just goes pot, he's going to get a lot of the hands that he wants to fold. But he does go all in, and hero does make the correct call on the river. Hope you got a lot out of this. If you got this far in the video, hit that like and subscribe button. Be sure to drop a comment and let us know how you might play this hand. And if you're interested in more about growing in poker, check out all the information in the description. All of my social media is down there. I stream on Twitch a couple times a week. I offer private coaching, and Team 100K is an epic community we're a part of grinders and casual players working together to get better at the game. Lots of opportunities to get involved and even ways for you to send hands and be featured on the Poker Breakdown. That's it for today. We will see you tomorrow.